This is an educational video regarding a sexually violent predator that has moved into our community. We want to make sure you have all of the information so you can make important decisions for you and your family. Throughout this video, you'll hear from several members of our local law enforcement community as we discuss why we're doing this community notification, how sex offenders are managed, as well as safety suggestions. At the end, we'll give you information about the specific individual that is the subject of this community notification. In the mid-90s, the federal government established several laws which provide the foundation for Colorado laws regarding sex offenders and the reason for this video. The law requires states to establish sex offender registrations for all convicted sex offenders and ways to track them. It also requires states to find a means of notifying residents and communities where sex offenders live. Additionally, the law provides lifetime supervision for some sex offenders, as well as a national sex offender registry. In general, these laws mean sex offenders have a lesser right to privacy, and the community and law enforcement have a right to know who they are and where they live to keep people safe.
Every state has ways of identifying highest risk offenders. In Colorado, there's a difference between a registered sex offender and a sexually violent predator. A sexually violent predator, or SVP, is a classification given to identify the highest risk sex offenders. Colorado identifies SVPs in two ways. If the conviction occurred in Colorado, there are 4 factors that go into determining if someone is classified as an SVP: whether the offender is an adult, the date of the crime and the conviction, the relationship to the victim, and the results of an assessment. If the conviction happened in another state and that state classified the person as a highest risk offender, equivalent to Colorado's classification of sexually violent predator, then the offender is given the SVP classification in Colorado.
Colorado law states that all SVPs are subject to a community notification when they move to a new address. Community notification begins when the Department of Corrections, Parole, or Probation, or another state notifies local law enforcement that the SVP is arriving in their community. The SVP must register with the local law enforcement agency. That agency then conducts a notification in accordance with the Colorado Sex Offender Management Board criteria. This video is just one way that local law enforcement conducts those community notifications. This isn't your only source of information. You can always stop by any of the local law enforcement agencies for a complete list of all the registered adult felony sex offenders living in each jurisdiction. If you want to see where the SVPs and registered sex offenders live in Mesa County, regardless of the jurisdiction, you can find that information at the website on the screen.
Some, but not all SVPs are under criminal justice supervision, like probation or parole, and can be safely managed in the community. A sex offender placed on probation or parole will have additional conditions they must follow. These conditions tend to be intensive and lengthy. They may include waiving confidentiality, getting treatment specifically related to the crime, and polygraph testing. Waiving confidentiality is important because secrecy really undermines rehabilitation efforts and threatens public safety. Sex offenders must be completely accountable for their behavior and agree to these intensive and intrusive measures in order to remain under community supervision. The alternative is returning to jail.
Colorado uses a 3-pronged approach for managing sexually violent predators. First is criminal justice supervision. This is typically probation or parole. Second is the sex offender-specific treatment, involving treatment by a court-ordered therapist. Third is a polygraph examination. All sex offenders, including SVPs who are under supervision while in the community, are required to undergo polygraph examinations on a regular basis. We believe that the community can be an integral part of this system by reporting anything suspicious to the authorities in an appropriate manner. Locally, you can call 970-242-6707 to report suspicious behavior, or call 911 if you feel it's an immediate threat to someone's safety.
In Colorado, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 17 men have been victims of sex assault in their lifetime. More than 80% of sex crimes are never reported to law enforcement, meaning most of them are not even caught or detected. Sex offenders are deceptive, manipulative, and secretive in the way they commit their crimes. This may make it difficult to identify a sex offender, as there is no typical sex offender. Some sex offenders may not have a long history of criminal behavior. Many sex offenders have no criminal history at all. Studies show that 75% of sex offenses are carefully planned. These are not impulsive acts. It's also important to know that most offenders engage in what we call crossover behavior. This means although an offender may not be caught for one type of offense, they are often at risk of committing another type of crime. Sex offenders may be convicted of victimizing a person of a certain age, for example. But that does not mean that they will not harm someone of another age or gender.
The crime a person was convicted of is only one indicator of risk. Most sex offenders are male. Female offenders account for less than 10% of offenders. Sexual deviancy typically begins in mid to late adolescence. It's also important to know sex assaults do not necessarily occur in dangerous places. Studies show that more than half of sex assaults occur at or near the home of the victim or a close acquaintance of the victim. Most sex crimes are not committed by strangers. 73 to even 90% of sex offenses are committed by someone the victim knows.
Sex offenders use power and control to dominate and humiliate victims of both genders. Only about 4% of rape victims sustain serious physical injuries as a result of rape. 70% reported no physical injuries at all. All victims suffer from the effects of sexual assault and deal with them throughout their lives. They may exhibit many different responses to the trauma, including crying, anger, or being quiet or withdrawn. Sex assault by someone known to the victim creates an even more difficult recovery process. Victims often develop post-traumatic stress disorder and long-term effects, including anxiety, eating disorders, flashbacks, divorce, loss of sexual interest, loss of concentration, and sleeping disorders. Victims of sex assault are 3 times more likely than the general population to suffer from depression and are 13 times more likely to attempt suicide. They also have greatly increased rates of substance use or abuse and a higher rate of unwanted pregnancy, and they have an increased risk of involvement with the judicial system. One of the ways to combat that is to control the response and minimize it, which is done when the victims are supported and believed by their families and the members of the community.
All SVPs and some other sex offenders must register on a quarterly basis with local law enforcement agencies for the rest of their lives. Those convicted of sex crimes against children are required to register their email addresses and internet identifiers with local law enforcement agencies. It's important to remember, though, that sex offenders have the same need for housing and employment as other citizens, and harassing threats and intimidation of those offenders is counterproductive to the community management goals. In fact, it may cause offenders to go underground to avoid registering with local law enforcement, making it very difficult to track and manage them. Harassments and threats made to sex offenders are criminal. They will be investigated, and those doing the harassing will be subject to prosecution.
There is no way to protect yourself in all situations, and the following tips and advice cannot completely eliminate the risk of sexual assault. However, they may provide you with information to prepare you and your family for potential situations. Many people are concerned about what to tell their children about this sexually violent predator that has moved into their area. Avoid any scary details, be honest, and use language that is age appropriate. Teach your children not to harass or visit the offender's home or yard, and teach them to tell safe adults if anyone acts inappropriately toward them, such as if they're too friendly or threatening, or if they're just making the child uncomfortable. You should pay close attention to your child's thoughts and feelings. Role play with your child. Act out scenarios of various dangerous situations and teach them how to respond. This gives the child the ability to recognize such situations and not be surprised by what's happening to them. Teach your child to avoid high-risk situations and be observant of their surroundings. Teach them to be thoughtful and to use good judgment when choosing their friends and partners. Teach them appropriate social behaviors. Teach them the correct names for body parts. And teach them that adults are not always right. You can also teach your children the importance of honesty and the danger of keeping secrets.
In just a few moments, you're going to receive information regarding the sexually violent predator that is moving into our community.
Remember to view the website to see where all sex offenders live in Mesa County.
If you have any questions, contact any of the local law enforcement agencies in Mesa County.
And thank you for taking the time to educate yourself about this important topic.
Here is some specific information about the subject of this community notification, 44-year-old Michael Preston Owen. His birth date is August 25, 1981. He is a white male, 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing 230 pounds with brown hair and blue eyes. He has multiple tattoos covering both arms, his right shoulder, abdomen, and both legs. He is living at 436 South Avenue here in Grand Junction, Colorado. There are no known vehicles associated with this individual. His criminal history related to this notification includes a 2025 Mesa County, Colorado case, felony conviction for attempted sexual assault on a child. Michael Preston Owen is currently under community corrections supervision through the Colorado Department of Corrections in Colorado Springs. For inquiries, contact Case Manager Donald Webb at 970-623-8000 or the Colorado Department of Corrections at 1-800-426-9120. The Grand Junction Police Department is available to provide useful information regarding sexual assault and personal safety and to make referrals to other local resources to help those who have been impacted by sexual assault or this notification process. If you have information regarding current criminal activity of this or any other offender, or if you observe this offender engaging in any high risk or inappropriate behavior, please call 911. The information provided herein is current and accurate as of this date, but is subject to change. For additional information, please contact the Registered Sex Offender Program at 970-549-5234, Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.